Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 155th Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Today's topic is actually many topics. It appears as though global warming or climate change will be a hot-button issue throughout the upcoming presidential election. While the United States leads the world in the reduction of CO2 from the burning of fossil fuel, more aggressive, life-changing efforts are being discussed. Our panel will consider a number of questions that demand answers before any life-altering actions can be given serious consideration by our government. Our panel today, beginning on my left, is Patty Haskins, member of the Wadsworth City Council. On her left is Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services. On his left is Joe Gaines of the faculty of the University of Akron. And on his left is Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist. Patty, I've given you and the rest of the panel a list of questions that strike me as essential to be answered before any additional aggressive action can be taken against climate change. Feel free to address any of them or provide a question of your own.
You know, the first one you ask is the temperature rising? And it is. Of course, it is always, there has been fluctuation in the temperature over the eons that the Earth has been in existence. One of the concerns, however, at this point is the rate at which it is growing. And in the past 50 years, it is extraordinarily quick at how it is growing in comparison to the past. I think it's growing at a rate of approximately 3% right now. The concern is that if it gets up to 5%, then we have some real problems.
Now put that in perspective. It's gone up 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit in the last 50 years.
Right, but that has an impact on what's going on in the country. All we have to do is to take a look at the rise of natural disasters that have occurred. The flooding, the number of hurricanes, the storms, the earthquakes, and all of these do have a connection to the climate and the way that it's being changed or is changing at this matter. There have been some questions at times about the methods by which they have determined that there is change in the climate. I think that many of the outliers that say that, oh, it's not reliable and so forth, many of those have been debunked. There's also a question of whether the cause of the temperature change is man-made or it's natural. Of course, there are many things that cause the temperature to change and the climate to change that are not man-made, that we have nothing that we can do about. The thing is, though, we do have the power within our hands to change or to make some changes on those that are man-made. You talked about politics, how that is involved. It would be difficult to say that we are having difficulty handling the effect of fossil fuels upon this climate if you don't look at the political aspect of that. And those that are part of the fossil fuel industry are going to definitely be against some of the proposals that they feel are going to injure their
bottom line.
And that you put money, before anything else. Some of this came to, I think, light when Greta Thunberg, the Swedish teenager who just spoke at the United Nations, who gave a very impassioned speech saying how we have made the bottom line be money as opposed to the condition and the care of our people upon this planet and the saving of the planet. I think when we look at some of the things that can be done and some of the effects, we have to look at, for example, deforestation and the urbanization of the various areas. I mean, all we have to do is look down at the Amazon, which the spread of the fires that are, I think they're still going on if I'm not mistaken, but the amount of the tree coverage that was there that has been destroyed. And it's important that we have that because the Amazon is one of the leading, I think it's the #1 cause of absorption of CO2, which helps prevent
the whole rainforest.
The whole rainforest area does that. And when those areas burn down, for whatever reason, and it is man-made, a lot of the reasons that it is on fire is because of some of the actions that have been taken in that area. That absorption of CO2 is not there, which of course can affect the amount of rain that we have. It can affect the temperature of the area, and of course the gathering of the CO2. We can look at other things like even relaxation of regulations on things that affect the climate and affect the temperature. Relaxation of regulations is so that companies can grow and their bottom line is made better. But with the blind eye turned to the effects that it could have upon the planet and upon the temperatures within the country. Now the thing is, I just recently saw a lady, she was I think a former EPA director, that said, fortunately, even though these regulations have been removed on some companies, many of the companies are not just getting rid of the measures that they have taken in order to make the climate a little bit safer and the air cleaner and the water cleaner, that some companies actually see that there is an advantage to that. But there are those that are not. So I think it's something we still have to discuss, we still have to work on, but to ignore the fact that all of it isn't man-made and do nothing, I think would be irresponsible in this day and time.
Oh, I think that a lot of people would agree with you. Are you one of them, Bryan?
Sure. I agree that we need to be good stewards of the planet. I think the points that Patty made are in these articles that I did a little Google search on and came up with some things. One from the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, Dr. S.I. Rasool predicted that in the next 50 years there'd be so much fine dust that the temperature of the Earth would drop by 6 degrees, and this could trigger an ice age.
Fine dust.
Fine dust, man-made fine dust from just us being us. Pollute, all that kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
And that this ice age would flood the world's coastal cities and further lower temperatures to build up new glaciers that could eventually cover huge areas of the Earth. And this was in 1971. Another article from NASA, a NASA scientist, you probably guessed the time. He said that in 1990, if the record temperatures continued, the Earth would basically be so hot that we would not be able to sustain ourselves, that there'd be widespread droughts, and that there would be no more snow. And basically the worst case scenario would be the maximum strength of hurricanes would increase by 50%, carbon dioxide in the atmosphere would double, and with additional, the heat basically would create a global drought. And this was predicted back in 1988 by James Hansen of the National.
From NASA.
Yeah.
And this was predicted to occur by 1990?
Yeah, this was 1990. This was an article published in 1988. And I can go on. I think what has happened is that the extremists have taken over the argument. And they've labeled people that don't agree with them 100% as deniers, and I don't believe that really helps.
And the deniers
discussion.
call those people the alarmists.
The alarmists, right?
So we got to name each other.
Right. We got to label each other, and I just go back to those cartoons of the guy standing on the corner. He looks like Moses. He's got that sign that says, "The end is near. The end is near." I'll tell you what I don't believe. I don't believe the Earth is going to come to a conclusion in 11 years or 14 years. I don't believe that the country or any country in the world has the ability to do what the folks on the left, on the far left, want us to do, and that is get rid of fossil fuels. That is not going to happen because developing countries depend on the fossil fuel industry. When you look at the big polluters in the world, you look at China. China is building probably, I think they're going to have another 30 coal-fired power plants come online within the next 2 or 3 years. they're pumping out, and I don't know if they've got clean coal or whatever, the scrubbers and all that kind of stuff. I do know that the extreme that some of the laws that were passed hampered local businesses. For instance, if you had a pond on your farm, you could be subject to fines of $2,000 or $3,000 a day if you weren't compliant with the EPA regulations. I think those were some of the loosening of the regulations. It wasn't meant to, give corporations a free rein to pollute or anything like that. So I think if we bring it back from the edge, I think more people would buy in, and more people would see the importance of being a good steward of the environment. I can remember in my own, I'm old enough to remember acid rain. I don't know if you remember acid rain.
Absolutely.
I remember, they said if you parked your car out, and living in New Jersey, there were plenty of refineries. There are plenty of refineries in New Jersey. They refine oil down to gas and different, naphtha and all that kind of stuff. Plus there were chemical plants because of the resource of water. Chemical plants need water. And they said, if your car was left out and it would pit and the acid rain would, sooner or later, it would destroy the environment, and that never happened. So I'm for a measured approach. I'm not a denier. I'm not part of the alarmist gang, but I think we can do things that will mitigate climate change, however you want to define that. It's either global warming. I've got articles about ice age. I've got articles that were written by scientists talking about how the New York City would be underwater by now. So I think we need to come back from the edge, and I agree with a lot of the things that we can do, but I don't think the country or any society is willing to say, we need to go back to sort of caveman.
Joe, this was your topic. You suggested it a month or so ago.
Well, we all make mistakes.
Don't say that now.
Well, I hesitate a little bit because I have mixed emotions on this topic. I think it's become a political football.
Okay, remember what the topic is today, that there are questions that need to be answered, and we want to talk about what those questions are.
I understand that.
Okay.
But when I say political football, what I'm saying is that I don't think we're trying to answer the questions. I think what we're trying to do is use it to harm the other opponent, and make an opponent, liberal, conservative, whatever we should, like what you were saying, which I thought was very well. I have problems with that. The average global temperature on Earth has increased from about 0.8 Celsius, 1.4 Fahrenheit since 1880.
I'm sorry, say those numbers again.
0.8 Celsius and 1.4 Fahrenheit since 1880. 2/3 of the warming has occurred since 1975 at a rate of roughly 0.15 to 20 Celsius per decade.
Okay, 1975 was a real low period in global temperatures, right?
Right. And you're right about the ice age too. There's talk about that. But what bothers me is we're not doing anything. I mean, it seems like we should be doing something. The government should be active in doing things. Instead, what we do is if one president signs a document to act, another one comes out and says, well, he did it because he's liberal or because he's too much to the extreme. Or if one comes out and says, well, I'm doing it because I'm conservative, I'm trying to conserve, the other one comes out and says, well, he's too much on that side.
Let me make a comment about that, because I hear that so often. We're not doing anything.
Are we?
If you were to look at the power plants that are being shut down, the inefficient, polluting power plants, every year they're being taken offline, and they're being replaced in most cases with highly efficient, non-polluting or less polluting power plants. we're also making tremendous advances in renewable energy.
Well, that's true.
Particularly in
Yeah.
solar and wind.
Here in the city, we have really increased.
Well,
our
China
solar.
has,
We're
you know,
doing, my point is we're doing a lot.
Well-
And the people who say we're doing nothing, I don't, maybe there's a name for them. Are
Not
they the
me.
alarmists?
Do we have to name them?
well, the thing is, like when he was saying about China with coal and everything, and he's right, but China's also made all their new cars electric. You can't drive a cab in China unless it's an electric car.
Really?
Yeah. Which is causing other problems for them. But all their cars now are being made electric, and they're
That's
pushing
why they
that.
need the power plants to charge those electric cars.
I don't know. It might be true. But are we
Ron
doing
is
anything like
smiling,
that?
and I can
That's
hardly
the
wait to
kicker,
hear what he has
electric
to
cars.
say.
Yeah.
But are we doing that? Are we going to electric cars? Are we going towards more efficient means of energy?
Seems
Hopefully we are.
Been moving that way for a long time.
But it's taken so long, and it became. When I say political football, you know, I mean, that's all you hear is an argument from both sides. You know, you guys are
Well,
wrong.
a typical American.
I'm
you want
right,
it
you're
now.
wrong.
Yeah.
I think of the argument sometimes as this big aircraft carrier, and it takes time. You know, I distinctly remember the campaigns about littering. You used to drive down the highway and you'd see
Yeah.
just people just throwing things out of their
Right.
cars. And now you don't see that much. I think people are changing
Yeah.
to be more friendly to the environment, to be more aware of things.
Recyclable.
You know, recyclables and all that kind of stuff. And it takes time to turn.
Ron, I know this is a topic you've given a lot of thought to.
It's a highly fascinating and complex chemical question, and even more complex political question. But looking at some of your points here, you have one thing that's an interesting point that I'm trying to follow up on. You say there's some empirical evidence that temperature has changed before CO2 has changed.
Yeah.
I'd appreciate seeing your references to that.
That would be the Vostok ice cores in the Antarctic.
I'll look that up. But I was on the NOAA site, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration site. I see Joe is looking at the NASA site. There were slight differences there. I don't know which is updated, but they quote a temperature rise of 1.62 degrees F and 0.96 Celsius since the same period of time, the late 19th century. At any rate, I've sent an email off to the NOAA people asking them for that very point about the ice core situation, because looking at the data back to 800,000 years, the ice core data show a maximum CO2 concentration of 300 parts per million. Presently it's 412 as of last week. So
I'm sorry, would you say that again?
I actually saw that.
for 700,000 years, the ice core data show that the maximum CO2 concentration in the atmosphere is 300 parts per million. Presently, as of last week, it's 412.
I saw
okay.
that.
And that's
I
all
did too.
occurred since the Industrial Revolution, basically. About 7,000 years ago, in fact, so they say, the last ice age ended fairly abruptly, which is about coincident with the establishment of civilization. When cities began to be built, we started cutting down trees, and chemically there's positive feedback here. You know, I mean, this isn't part of your question exactly, but CO2 builds up, trees are cut down, they use less CO2. The CO2, although and you've pointed out asked this in the past, how come a few parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has such a big effect? And there's a feedback effect here too. The carbon dioxide heats up, the molecules begin to increase because they're absorbing the infrared energy. They transmit the heat to other molecules and radiate it back to the Earth. The ocean picks up a lot of it. And what was the data I got up to about 2,300 feet of ocean, depth in the ocean. It's risen about 0.4 of a degree Fahrenheit since or about 0.96 Fahrenheit in the period of measurement. And this has other effects, of course. The ocean water expands. Arctic ice is at its lowest point ever, so that's putting more water into the system. And of course, all those rocks that are falling in there, and raising. Somebody said that, I think. And then the sea is acidifying as well, because carbon dioxide dissolved in water is carbonic acid. It's a weak acid, but it lowers the pH.
Yeah. One of the questions that I have, I know that there is a lot more money being invested in research to establish that global warming is man-made than there is in researching natural causes for global warming. And that there are a lot of questions about why. Why aren't we looking at other things?
We are, though.
Well, you research
We
what
are,
you
though.
can change. You can't change the natural causes, so you
I know,
research
but wouldn't
what
it be good to know exactly what?
I saw a graph. I tried to find it again. I don't know whether it was NASA or NOAA, but it showed a series of graphs. Here's solar cycles. Here's volcanic eruptions. Here's a number of other things. And here's CO2. And plotted those all summed together, CO2 being a very large one and increasing very rapidly compared to all of the others. Those were basically little horizontal lines on the bottom. CO2 up in its usual, now familiar asymptotic rise. Combined all together, they match the temperature rise. So it's being looked at. Solar cycles haven't, there's been no net change anyway in quite a while, in its 11-year cycle. No net change in the temperature that the Earth is receiving. The ice ages are apparently came on, we now feel, by slight variations in the Earth's orbit.
Why hasn't the president agreed? Didn't Trump at one point say that it didn't exist at all?
He called it a hoax.
Yeah.
I mean, just that to me bothers me.
And
That our leaders would go to an extreme, one way or the other.
Obama and Kerry both insisted that 97% of the world's scientists agree that CO2 is causing global warming, and that is nowhere can anyone come up with the survey, the study that showed 97% of the scientists agreed to anything.
Yeah, but look at Trump. He comes out and says
But I
there's
know,
no
but
problem.
he says it's a hoax. All I'm saying is all presidents lie.
Well, yeah, politically, I understand what
particularly
you-
when you're talking about a topic that can get votes or lose them one way or another. But
well, it says
my question is that if the science is so compelling, why do the so-called alarmists, and that's not my word, why do they have to exaggerate and distort so much?
Well, that's where the political part comes in.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I'm old enough to remember the controversy around Albert Wegener's theory of continental drift. And also, no one wanted to believe Rachel Carson. She said DDT was
Right.
killing
Right.
eagles. But people come around. The science is there. The numbers are there. And your comment on the ice core data, I need that number.
I got it
I
here.
have to be followed by,
Here,
It's
all there.
thank you, my friend.
The only advantage to having alarmists.
I can't see the clock.
Oh.
I have no idea what.
2 minutes.
Okay.
The only good thing about alarmists, at least they're drawing our attention to the
Right.
problem and to look at
Yeah.
that problem. And then hopefully that more settled minds might actually look at it.
Are you concerned that we're going to rush headlong into a lot of very aggressive measures that cause widespread starvation
No.
and
No.
poverty?
No, I'm
You're
not.
not concerned about
No,
that?
I don't think that that's going to happen. But what I have seen is you talked about the renewables. solar and wind power, which was laughed at even 5 years ago, is now very profitable, and it's being used to replace fossil
getting
fuels.
better.
It is getting much better, but that has come because of a demand for ways to fight climate change and to do what we can, and I think with a lot of careful discussion.
I think we have to realize that if we went carbon free over the next decade or so, it's going to be decades until the hardships that occurs.
Because
are
the
gonna even
CO2
out.
stays in the environment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The economic upheaval, people who work in fossil fuels we're going to have to be retrained, that sort of thing.
That's what life is about. You know, I come from Akron. I know about people needing to be retrained.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, like coal miners. I mean, the whole thing is like, do we want to lose our coal mining? Why not?
I
We
think-
lost our tire factories in Akron.
Well, the thing is, though, why does it always have to be the extreme answer? Why can't it be a portfolio of renewables, fossil fuels? You know, use less fossil fuels. Why do we have to
Because
disregard?
that would require cooperation.
Right.
There you go.
Nuclear. We can't do nuclear because of this, that, and the other. I mean, there are plenty of countries that do very well with nuclear. Why does that have to not be part of the
I don't know,
portfolio?
we still don't know what's happening to all those spent fuel rods, though, do we?
Yes.
We're using them as ammunition.
That's a problem.
Good point.
Well, thank you very much, folks. I hope we don't have to talk about this
No.
this topic again.
I won't bring it up ever again.
You
Thank
can
you.
bring it up.